I'm Mike Wallace. He was a divisive man in a divisive time. Folk hero to some, demagogue to others. George Corley Wallace at another time in history might have been just another governor of a small southern state. But the heat generated by the civil rights movement catapulted Wallace onto the national scene, and he exploited that recognition in 4 aggressive runs for the presidency, campaigns that were cut short only by a would-be assassin's bullet.
Now, therefore, I, George C. Wallace, as governor of the state of Alabama.
He first came to national attention in 1963, trying to face down Assistant Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach in the doorway of the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Katzenbach had come to the university to enforce a court order permitting the registration of 2 black students, James Hood and Vivian Malone, the first blacks in the history of the university.
Do hereby denounce and forbid this illegal and unwarranted action by the central government.
Governor, I'm not interested in a show. I don't know what the purpose of the show is. I am interested in the orders of these courts being enforced.
That same day, President John Kennedy federalized the Alabama National Guard to enforce the admission of the 2 students. Wallace backed down, but nonetheless, he claimed victory.
We are winning in this fight because we are awakening the American people to the dangers that we have spoken about so many times, which is so evident today, the trend toward military dictatorship in this country.
Wallace's defiance served as a launching pad for his national ambitions. As he told a fellow legislator shortly before he became governor, "I'm going to make race the basis of politics in this state, and I'm going to make it the basis of politics in this country." He took that message nationwide, campaigning against President Kennedy's proposed civil rights bill to end legal segregation in the South.
None of the provisions of this act, under the public accommodation section, if your grandmother's running a boarding house with 6 or more rooms in it, she could be sent to the penitentiary without a trial by jury because she violated the provisions of this act.
Disaffected white Americans roared with such enthusiasm that Wallace decided to make a token run for the Democratic nomination for president in 1964, with astonishing results. He got 40% of the primary vote in Wisconsin, 29% in Indiana.
I would like to tell you this tonight.
An ex-Golden Gloves champion, Wallace loved to be provocative, challenging, pugnacious.
I would show that fellow where the little boy's room is. When I came to this state, they said we're not going to get any votes. But they said that in Wisconsin, they said it in Indiana. We shook the eye teeth of the liberals in Wisconsin. Let's make them fall out here in the state of Maryland.
And he almost did, winning 43% of the vote in that state's 1964 Democratic primary before withdrawing from the race. An uneasy President Johnson attributed Wallace's success to what he called white backlash. But African Americans had another explanation.
What Wallace is doing here in Maryland, what he has done in Illinois, what he has done in other states, is provide the traditional opportunity for keeping Negroes in their place with the traditional theories of race relations, the boogeyman theory of race relations. And that's all he really is. He's a big boogeyman.
Flush with success, Wallace looked forward eagerly to a full-blown presidential campaign in 1968. Because he needed the governorship of Alabama as a national platform, and because he failed to get the Alabama Constitution amended so he could run for a 3rd consecutive term, Wallace decided to run his wife, the shy, fragile Lurleen, for governor in 1966.
The record of the Wallace administration is one of honesty, integrity, and progress. If you want this record continued, I ask you to cast your vote for me on May 3rd.
But there was never any doubt about whom Alabamians were voting for.
Do you think that Lurleen Wallace could perform effectively as a governor of the state of Alabama?
No, I don't think so. I don't think she has the qualifications, the experience, and the tragedy is that she doesn't intend to perform as governor. Governor Wallace has made it very clear, if he's elected, that he will run the state and that Mrs. Wallace will merely be a figurehead.
Nevertheless, Lurleen won easily, clearing the way for another George Wallace run for the presidency.
In 1968, if one of the two national parties do not give the people of this nation someone that will express the attitudes and aspirations of the overwhelming majority, in my judgment, of the people of this country, if that doesn't happen, you can look for us to be in your state all the way from Maine to California.
George Wallace came to town last night for the obvious reason. As his press secretary said yesterday, you don't think the governor would fly all the way up to Washington, hire a hall, and then announce he wasn't going to run, do you? So the United States will again be treated to or punished by its first three-way presidential race since 1948.
Wallace formed the American Independent Party to run against Republican Richard Nixon and Democrat Hubert Humphrey. The country Wallace faced had changed dramatically since 1964. Vietnam had split the U.S. in two. Urban rioting dotted the cities. And by now, Wallace's message had broadened to reflect the unease many Americans felt at the direction of the country.
They have never paid any attention to the aspirations of the average man on the street, to the oil worker, the shipyard worker, the auto worker, the communication worker, the little businessman, and the white-collar worker. They've said, no, we're going to bust your children. No, we're going to tell you who you can sell your property to.
Wallace appealed to whites who were afraid that whatever progress blacks made would come at their expense.
I think he's one of the greatest men that I've heard in many a day.
He's the greatest American, past, present, and the future.
In a time of social change, Wallace skillfully played on people's fears about unrest, upheaval.
Always talking about free speech, but they don't want anybody to speak except themselves, so they don't really believe in free speech, but that's all right. We'll tolerate them a while. And both national parties have kowtowed to every anarchist that has roamed the street for so long. And I tell you, you better have your day now, because after November 5th, you anarchists are through in this country. I can assure you that.
He was a shrewd and skillful politician, a populist railing at Washington and the experts who ran it.
When these papers imply that I have expertise, I don't even allow it in my house, I don't use it, and there's nobody in my family that's ever suffered from expertise.
But while Wallace talked about the failures of big government, veiled references to race were always at the heart of his message. As I found out when I talked with him in 1968, shortly after the release of the Kerner Commission report examining the cause of urban riots.
Would you expect to have a Negro in your administration?
Are you talking about in the cabinet or in the administration?
In the cabinet or in the administration?
Well, certainly Negroes will be in every administration and should be, because Negroes are citizens of this country the same as we are, and they will always be in the government.
All right.
Let's get off of race. I'm not a racist. If everybody's a racist who's been called one, you are one, how do you explain your racism away? The Kerner Commission said you was one, and that's a presidential report.
Well, not me. You're not speaking
about... It said all the American people.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And you're an American.
Yes.
Well, that got you.
Touche.
Touche.
By late August, according to the Gallup poll, 21% of the electorate favored Wallace for president. He was ahead of both Republican Nixon and Democrat Humphrey. And what's more, his popularity, particularly after the riots at the Democratic Convention in Chicago, only seemed to grow.
Well, you know why the breakdown of law and order exists? It's because of militants, activists, revolutionaries, anarchists, and some communists, and the Supreme Court having handcuffed the police in our country and made them second-rate citizens.
So I want to tell you young folks here tonight that when I become your president and you lie down in front of my automobile, you're not going to lie down in front of any more automobiles, I can tell you that.
But just as Wallace was peaking, his campaign stumbled badly. He had picked for his running mate former Air Force General Curtis LeMay, who had a reputation for speaking first and thinking later. LeMay was asked what he thought might be an appropriate U.S. response to a military crisis.
If I found it necessary, I would use anything that we could dream up. Anything that we could dream up, including nuclear weapons, if it was necessary.
Wallace's support gradually began to erode. Richard Nixon was barely elected over Hubert Humphrey. Wallace finished third, receiving no more than 14% of the popular vote and carrying only 5 southern states.
I don't consider myself a loser in '68. I consider that we influenced national events in 1968.
Influence is too pale a word. With the death of Bobby Kennedy in June of 1968, the blue-collar vote, which had religiously voted Democratic since the days of Franklin Roosevelt, was suddenly up for grabs, and Wallace showed how to get it. He appealed to what he called the average person, the person, he said, who went to work and paid his taxes and raised his family, the person whom Washington seemed to have forgotten in its zeal to right the wrongs of racism. And George Wallace was just beginning to change the face of American politics. In the middle of his 1968 bid to become president, Wallace's wife Lurleen died of cancer. Lieutenant Governor Albert Brewer succeeded her, and Brewer, with some secret financial help from the Nixon White House, decided to run for a full term in 1970 against George Wallace. But Wallace went on to win out and to set his sights again on yet another campaign for the presidency in 1972, this time as a Democrat. Early on, Wallace demonstrated that he hadn't lost his touch with the issue that angered his voters most.
And when you elect me in Florida, you're going to say, we're fed up about this school business. We believe in non-discrimination. We want freedom of choice, but we're tired of busing and closing schools and trifling with our little children, black and white. And already the president is saying, I might come out against it myself in a few days, and if you elect me in Florida, they all going to come out against it. I tell you that. They all going to come out against it.
Wallace's white-hot rhetoric produced another dramatic upset.
George Wallace, the big winner of the Florida primary with 43% of the vote, a bigger winner than anticipated, apparently getting all of the state's convention votes.
Then on to Wisconsin, where Wallace didn't expect to do well because busing was not a big issue there. He campaigned there only 9 days.
The conventional wisdom here, that's a kind of informed guessing, is that next Tuesday, George Wallace will get perhaps 12% of the vote or more, draining off a lot of votes from the right, getting some from the middle, and also probably getting a number of crossover Republican votes.
But on primary night, another surprise. Wallace got 22% of the vote, coming in second to South Dakota Senator George McGovern.
I didn't run because of you. I was only your voice, and I am now your candidate, and I'll continue to be your candidate, but God bless all of you folks for helping us here in the great state of Wisconsin. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Every 4 years, it seems, the Alabama governor runs for president, and every 4 years he picks up just a little more steam. This year, busing, taxes, welfare, and the darkling notion in the land that perhaps the Washington establishment really doesn't know quite what it's doing is apparently attracting more voters than ever before to maverick George Wallace.
Send them a message that I'm fed up to hear in paying welfare loafers in the sun of my hard-earned money here in the state of Tennessee.
He was on a roll. He came in second in Pennsylvania, second in Indiana, first in Alabama and Tennessee. It was hard to see how he could fail to play a major role at the 1972 Democratic Convention. But then...
Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States, the Honorable George C. Wallace!
The previous week, Wallace had dropped airport appearances in favor of shopping centers because there were more people at the malls. On May 15th, he was in Laurel, Maryland, the eve of the Maryland and Michigan primary. A 21-year-old busboy from Milwaukee, Arthur Bremer, who had first stalked Richard Nixon, shot George Wallace, paralyzing him from the waist down. The next day, he won both the Maryland and the Michigan primaries. With his second wife, Cornelia, by his side, Wallace lay in a hospital bed with more popular votes than any other Democrat.
I was warned many times they hope I would stay out of crowds. It always worried them about my being in crowds, and of course I got into a crowd and I'm in a wheelchair.
But while he would go on to win a few more delegates and another 3 million primary votes, George Wallace's campaign was effectively over.
Taking place now for the arrival of George Wallace, a dramatic moment. victim of an assassination attempt on May 15th in Laurel, Maryland. In short time, he has recovered enough from his injuries to make it here to this convention, to this platform.
I am here because I want to help the Democratic Party. I want it again to become the party of the average citizen in this country as it used to be, and not the party of the intellectual pseudo-snobbery that has controlled it for so many years. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Governor Wallace isn't getting unalloyed cheers there. You can hear a lot of boos through this crowd as well as the cheers for him.
Do you ever think about that time and what might have happened had you not been shot?
I think that in 1972, and I think many folks who were in the convention know at that time, that had I not gotten shot, I would have been on the Democratic ticket in 72. And I do not believe the Democratic Party would have gone down to the humiliating defeat that it suffered in 72.
Wallace kept on going. He ran and won the Alabama governor's race again in 1974, but the presidency remained his dream.
I know the hierarchy of the Democratic Party wish that I would go away to Afghanistan or someplace, as I've said, because I don't think they want me to be involved, but I want them to know that unless they come forward in 1976 and get away from what they had in 1972, the people I represent are going to be very much involved.
And Wallace did run again in 1976, but it was to be his last try for national office. The front runner for the Democratic nomination was another Southern governor, Jimmy Carter. That didn't stop George Wallace, though.
And I'll keep on standing up for you all over these United States, and someday we're going to win. We're going to have freedom of choice. We're going to have the right to send our children where we want to send them and not where some judge or federal bureaucrat says so. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
But increasingly, the public was focusing on Wallace's health, and his poor showing in the California primary spelled the end of any presidential hopes.
Governor Wallace, is this the last day of your last hurrah?
No, sir, I have this is not the last hurrah and not the last day of my last hurrah. The last day of my last hurrah will probably be the last day I spend on earth.
Increasingly deaf, subject to constant pain from the failed assassination wounds, Wallace left the Alabama governor's mansion in 1979, proud of what he'd done.
Every governor speaks as I used to speak 15 years ago, 12 years ago. Every fellow, every man in the Congress sounds almost like the George Wallace of '68. Even the president does. Even the members, those who are fixing to run for the presidency, they sound exactly like we did in '68. And that was when many of them said he's a radical, harebrained, wild man. So the wild man tactics and attitudes and positions of 1968 and '72 are now the positions of all of them.
But if George Wallace had altered the political landscape, he had also begun to change his own views.
Do you feel that the fact that black students are now at the University of Alabama, that it is a better school?
Well, I see it's a better school, and the fact that it's better for our society that everybody have an equal opportunity to attend any place they want to attend.
That change, political observers said, was caused in part by his paralysis. It had given him a new perspective on what it meant to be an underdog. When Wallace ran and won the Alabama governor's race again in 1982, he attracted significant black support. By then, no Southern Democrat could be elected without black votes.
Regardless of your color, we all in the same fix. We have lost our jobs, our businesses. We cannot make ends meet, and therefore we must join together to see that every black and white Alabamian has jobs and opportunity to go to school.
There was one more surprise in 1986.
A man who had once symbolized resistance to integration was given an honorary degree by the South's most famous black college, Tuskegee Institute.
It is the highlight of my public service career, and I shall ever be grateful and honored. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
George Wallace's political career was nurtured by an explosive confrontation he did not create, but one that he skillfully exploited.